Meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Director Sewell.
Here.
Director Martin. Director Grasha. Thank you. I see you. Vice President Duncan.
Here.
And President Wright.
Here.
Thank you. We have quorum. Real quick, Arturo, can we do a sound check?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Perfect. Thank you.
No rush today?
Oh, no. Will, did you want me to say something, Nancy, or
Well,
did you want to?
excused absence, so yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, Russ is just, getting some things checked, up at Desert Regional, nothing big. And he couldn't be here today, so I would say that he has an excused absence.
Yeah,
Sure.
thank you, because I'm that too. Okay, thank you. So public input, we just have one public, right? And we've already asked Pamela if she'd like to say something, so I will move on unless I hear anything any different. We'll start with the only item on the agenda, FY 2020-2021 budget. General Manager, I'll give it to you first.
Okay, I'm just going to briefly say this is a workshop. We're going to, we listened to Matt's presentation. We've gone through this very carefully. We've done a number of things. We've frozen salaries. We've cut our budget as much as we can. And we've done what we think we can do. I'm very confident that we will get through this. I don't think anything is going to compare to the Great Recession. I'd like to have you, once you ask questions today, take it home. If you have more questions, please contact us and we'll get the information to you one way or another, preferably before the next board meeting, so that we have the opportunity to get everything to you that you need. And with that said, I'm going to turn it to Matt to make his presentation. So you're on, Matt.
All right, thank you, Arden. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. All right. As we go through this, I'm going to be sharing my screen, and this is somewhat challenging in and of itself without doing this via video, so please bear with me. I can't see everybody, so just interrupt me if you have a question or raise your hand or whatever best. We have completed our annual budget process. Bear with me a second here.
So we can make it bigger according to my screen, right? Okay.
Can everybody see that?
Yeah, and we can actually
Yeah.
make it ourselves, yeah. Our fingers.
All right, so as I mentioned, we've completed our process. Our process is a fairly lengthy process with many staff involved. We began this process in March, and we all know what else began in March, so it's been a different year for this process. But we are ready to present this to you and have some discussions and get through this. The budget consists of over 1,100 line items. Obviously, we're having this May board workshop, and we can schedule later meetings if necessary for further discussion. But usually how this works historically is a May board workshop, and then the final adoption in June. The budget document, if you remember, I believe it's on the website, but it is a little more in-depth than prior budgets. Used to, our budget document was strictly on an Excel spreadsheet. We've added to that and actually plan to add to that some more during this year's process to get a little bit more messaging out to customers and to the public. So real quick, I'd just like to thank all the staff involved. Arturo is my right hand and does a lot of work on this budget, but all departments and all staff were involved in this to some extent. So thanks in this odd process that we've gone through. So the current environment, obviously everybody knows we are in a unusual environment with this COVID-19 pandemic. There is obviously an impact on our national and local economy, and we still have a lot of unknowns moving forward. We really don't even know the full impact on our local and national economy. It's kind of all to be determined at this point. So there has been a study put out by Raftellus. This is online if you'd like to read it. It's called the Financial Impact of the COVID-19 Process to the Water Utilities. And their predictions, there's several predictions in there, but basically the ones that would affect us, they're predicting that we'll have a 6% increase in delinquencies from our customers as a result of this. So that's obviously a negative impact financially to the district, but also in their predictions is a 4.8% increase in residential consumption as a result of everybody staying home for these past couple of months. Being that our customer base is 95% residential, the net of those two factors hopefully will be fairly minimal on the total financial finances of the district. So my suggestion, and we've talked this over with Arden and executive staff, our recommendation is that we basically review this and revise it as soon as possible. As soon as a lot more of these unknowns become known, hopefully over the next several months, and as the economy starts to open back up and we get back to hopefully some level of normalcy, that instead of waiting 6 months just because that's what we've historically done, we're proposing that we bring this back, if possible, in 3 or 4 months and make some revisions to it with more known at that time. Sorry, just checking some notes here. Okay. The assumptions used on this budget. If we were the federal government, I would propose that we pass a continuing resolution and just kind of hang tight with our prior year budget and don't overspend that and revisit this in 3 or 4 months. We're obviously not the federal government, so we had to base our assumptions around that kind of theory. No revenue growth is predicted in this budget. We did have a rate increase at January 1 of 2020. That was a 9.5% increase on the water side and a 5% increase on the sewer side. But we took the effect of those out of our revenue. And so you'll see as we get into the numbers in a little more detail that basically all the revenue numbers are the same as they were last year. And again, planning to revisit this as soon as possible. Expenditures, excuse me. Expenditures have been cut back to essential only. We're not expanding the system. We're not expanding any with any big capital projects, anything of that nature. Only doing what we have to do to keep functioning and keep clean water delivered to our customers and sewer picked up from our customers, so to speak. So also no changes to the current classification plan and organizational chart. If you recall, we are currently at 49 FTEs. The current salary matrix is on our website, and it's been effective for all of last fiscal year and this fiscal year. So no change there. And real quick, as Arden might have mentioned earlier, everything that we go through here is available to anybody. So I didn't send it out beforehand because I thought it would be a little complex and it might it might cause more questions than explain anything to anybody. So we'll go through it today, and hopefully you can follow my mouse as we go through it, and I can get any of these documents or all of these documents to you to review prior to the June board meeting, where we'll obviously you will take action to adopt this budget. So going through financial review, this is where we're going to go through the budget spreadsheet in some detail and show you what we've done and not done, changes that have been made since last year, which are not very many. So hopefully this won't take very long. We'll go through some capital items. We reduced our capital program substantially, and we will talk about that in just a minute. We'll go through our continuing appropriations. That's the large spreadsheet that shows all of the capital jobs that are being proposed and not completed from prior years also. After that, we'll go through the operating side of the budget. We'll look at the budget summary, which is the document that you're probably used to seeing, which has historically been our budget document. And then we'll look at that same document from last year and see the comparison between the two and what we've done. And then something we've added this year is our budget by function. If you remember in the past, the groupings of our expenses are by department, and the layperson reading through that, other than knowing that it relates to pumping, for example, or accounting, you can see those numbers. But if you want to look at how much salaries were or how much legal expense was, it was spread amongst all those departments, so it was a little less meaningful. And hopefully as we look at it today by function, it will mean a little more and be a little more clear. So as I mentioned, before we get into I'm getting a message that my internet connection is unstable, so bear with me. As I mentioned, capital project reductions. We went through our proposed capital project list. Danny and I went through this in detail, and he went through it with his staff and determined that some of the projects that were intended to happen this year could be delayed and happen at a later date and still allow us to perform all of our essential functions. So the preliminary list of those projects was 8.3 million, as you see there. And then we've reduced that by almost 5.2 million during our budget process. And what you'll see on the proposed capital projects is that net figure of 3.1 million. In just a minute, we'll go over that in a little more detail. But I just wanted to highlight that as we go through this in detail, what you're seeing is the result of us already trimming, or not necessarily trimming, but delaying a lot of non-essential projects because of obvious situation that we're in here. So I'm going to switch now to the budget spreadsheet. Can everybody see the budget spreadsheet on their screen now?
Yep. Yeah.
All right, great. So this is the spreadsheet that we've historically looked at. Let me know if I can make it bigger or smaller or whatever you need. But this is the summary of our operating budget. Operating revenues is the first line. Operating expenses is all of these, and these are the groupings that I was alluding to earlier that are all of the different departments of the district. And by the way, these allocations and groupings are required by the state controller's office. That's the origin of those. So we don't have any choice in using those, but we can show it in a different way, and we'll see that in just a minute. So real quick, we're a little over $17 million in revenue proposed, and a little less than 17 million in total operating expenses proposed, to show a net operating income of 348,000. So even though that we have had to reduce our revenue assumptions because of the COVID pandemic, we were also able to trim expenses to keep those below operating revenues and keep this positive and a net income, and obviously not a net loss. So very quickly, just so everybody knows what they're looking at, as you go further to the right on this spreadsheet, it is just more detail in how we break out the different functions of the district. So the assessment districts and improvement districts, all that we need to keep track of individually. And it summarizes from right to left. And so when you get over in here, obviously here's the sewer district, water district, general district, sometimes referred to as a general fund, but it does not function like a general fund in a city. And then obviously all of those combined is the far left column. So again, 17 million revenue, little less than 17 million in expenses, positive net income. These two sections, the next two sections, are non-operating. We have a hard time budgeting these, or some of these I should say, because they're very unpredictable. For instance, grant revenue. We hope we know when we're going to get grants, but it never works out as we plan. We put in here our best guess and try to go from there. But all of this stuff, property taxes, connection fees, interest income, interest expense, all of that is outside of the normal operations of the district. And in just a second, we'll see how these compare to last year also, just to walk you through so you know what you're looking at. So if we add our operating income, then add in all of our non-operating, obviously you see the biggest chunk of that is grant revenue, and that's related to the sewer plant, and we'll see more of that in just a minute. But this gets us down to a 12.2 million net income, and that is the commonly referred to as the bottom line of the district. That is the end result of the proposed 21 operating capital budget. From there down, what we do, if you remember, is turn that into cash. So it's all great to say, okay, accountants, you say our net income is going to be 12.3 million, but we don't really know what that means, because you've got depreciation in there, you've got bills to pay, you've got debt payments to make, so on and so forth. So what we do is get this down to what that fiscal year of operations is going to produce in cash, and then lay it out as to how we're going to use that cash. So these next two sections basically are the pluses. The loan proceeds, our assumption in this process is that anything that we do not get in grant form for the expenditures related to the regional sewer plant are going to be SRF loan proceeds, and that is what is shown here. And again, we'll look at all this in a little more detail. I'm just trying to walk you through in summary, at least in the beginning. Assessment district collections, those are cash collections that we collect on previously levied assessment districts. And then we add back depreciation, because if you noticed up here, there is a almost $4 million depreciation figure, but that is an accounting estimate, and that is not cash going out the door. So we add that back to net income because we're not really paying that bill. That's just an accounting estimate as to the depletion of our assets. So total cash provided, a little over 33 million, including loan proceeds and assessment districts. And how we're going to use that cash is the next section here. We've got a little less than $700,000 in principal payments on outstanding debt. Most of that's related to the assessment districts also. The vast majority of the funds will be used in capital improvements. Again, we'll go through that in more detail, but a lot of that is also, if you remember, we got 14 million in loan proceeds and 9.5 million assumed in grant proceeds. So the district operations are not coming up with 35 million in cash. Okay, and then we will put in 1.9 into the capital replacement reserve, and then the 5.3 million, if all of these assumptions are correct, will be what we have to use out of our existing $35 million total district reserves. Does anybody have any questions on that so far?
Not yet.
Okay. All right.
Nancy, I see your lips moving, but I don't hear anything. You're muted.
Me?
Nancy. I just making sure she wasn't trying to say something. I can't read that. Can anybody read that? There we go.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. It wasn't unmuting, and then all of a sudden I got a little screen on. It says, do you want to unmute or not? And so it finally came on. Okay, sorry. Yes, I had a question. Matt, is that depreciation 100%?
Yes, always 100% depreciation is considered in our budget.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
Okay.
And I did notice, though, you guys, if you're not muted and you make a noise, your picture pops up down there. I think that's what's happening. Like Randy's down there now. Are you doing that, Dory?
If they haven't muted their own mic, any little noise will pop their picture up as if they're the speaker.
And that's what's happening. That's why I see Randy popping up once in a while. I thought that was it. Okay, thanks. That's why I had it on mute. I couldn't get it off.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, we're good?
Yes, I am.
All right. So what we want to take a look at now is our capital budget and continuing appropriations. This let me give you a little summary of what we're looking at here. This column is our capital budget that was presented and approved by the board for the June 30, 2020 fiscal year. So that is our starting point. During our last fiscal year, we had a couple of projects that came up and they were approved independently by the board during the year, but not part of the capital process. So we add those in here. And then that gets us basically to an adjusted capital budget. We go through each year with staff and review all the projects that are expected to close close by the end of the June 30, 2020 fiscal year, and we'll take those out and start the depreciation process on those projects. And then we have what is currently proposed to be added as capital projects for the current year, and we'll go through these in more detail to get us to our final number. So this will be the final capital budget for fiscal year 2021. And then we go through as staff and figure out how much was actually expended on these projects, because again, some of these projects have been open for more than 1 year. And so we track that, and then we determine what we think we're actually going to spend in cash on those projects for the current fiscal year. So in summary, what we've done is we had $91 million in the adjusted 21 budget. We're proposing to add the 3.1 million figure, and that's the figure we saw on the PowerPoint slide that started out at over 8 million. But we're proposing to add a little over 3 million to get our continuing appropriations final number for 21 at a little less than 95 million. And then we plan to actually spend on these projects a little less than 37 million in fiscal 21. But as we saw earlier, again, that $36.8 million is not all cash. And here is what is being proposed. We're taking out grants, and then we're taking out loan proceeds. So we're only expending $13 million of district funds for these $36 million in projects. So for the projects that are being added in the current year, by the way, these orange highlighted cells are all the projects that were intended to be in here for this year, but we've trimmed them out because of the current environment that we're in. And that is the difference between that 8 million and 3 million that we looked at on the slide. A couple of little house cleaning items in here where some capital projects went slightly over budget during the year, so we're adding that back to get it back to par. But what is really proposed to be added in this current fiscal year are the ones highlighted in green that add up to that $3.1 million figure. I'm hoping everybody can read those projects to the left. Is that big enough for everybody?
This in green?
Yes,
Yeah, the green.
yes, these projects here. Can everybody read that?
No, not, yeah, you've got to move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So if there's anything that jumps out there, the biggest item in the bunch is the first one, the sewer system collection. Basically, that is some required repairs that need to be made. I'm sorry, I said repairs. It's required replacement of some sewer lines in our system that the collections department has determined recently that need to be replaced for the system to continue to function properly. So that's the biggest item. Danny is on here. He can go through as much detail as anybody would like on any of these. Obviously, this is the biggest part of our budget where the dollar figures get into the millions. So I'll open it up at this point to anybody that has any questions on any of these items. But before we go there, I can just give you a quick rundown of some of the bigger ones. This arc flash evaluation study, that has to do with some of our facility sites and high voltage electricity. So it is strictly a health and safety study, and it's where somebody will come in and help us to keep our staff safe at those sites. Horton North, is that somebody with a question? Horton North building improvements. These are facilities that exist at the Horton plant. Danny can tell you what they were originally built for, but it's an old building. We need space down there, adequate restroom facilities and so on and so forth for our staff. That's what that's about. New water meters. This is new expanded water meters. From 3/4 to 2 inch. This is an annual item. If we go up higher in the list, you'll see the same thing for 2020. It's a guess, and that's just new meters, expanded meters on the system that might come in during the fiscal year. You see some big dollars here in backup generators. We have determined over the last several months with some power outages and other issues that we had that we needed additional generator capacity at a few of our sites, and that's what that is. A lot of the other ones are somewhat routine. Obviously, we're constantly making improvements to our computer systems and softwares inside the district to keep up with customer service and all that we do, our SCADA systems and all that. Is there any one of those items anybody would like to have Danny explain in more detail.
I just have a question for the perimeter wall for the Kerr property. Is there a reason for that? We've had it for a while. Was it just security?
Danny, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, just wait. Call me. Madam President, we've had issues that we've been working with over the last few years, primarily with CVCC across the street from us, or that property. Those properties is CVCC property. Code enforcement came in with assistance with the water district to help move a community of homeless people, and they have since over time moved on to our property. There are vehicles, there are RVs, there's trash, and it's a major liability for the district. So we have proposed, and to maintain people from coming onto that property, as recommended by code enforcement, is to put some sort of fencing. And the fencing that we're looking at is similar to what he has done, which is a post and cable system. So we're trying to minimize and eliminate the exposure that we currently have today.
Okay, then, thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Everything I see in green seems pretty reasonable, and I really appreciate that you guys are being proactive as far as trying to make some postponements on some of the items. Could we go through maybe some of the bigger items that are getting pushed back that are up in orange?
Sure.
Is there anything that we were kind of on the fence of, should we postpone or not? Or?
Danny, would you like to walk through those?
Yes, certainly. I would say in general, rather than walk through each one at this time, I can, but in general, over the last 12 to 18 months, we have been reviewing our operations, staffing, certain standard procedures, protocols, and have been changing our staffing requirements, trying to staff up and be able to be more proactive than reactive. As we've discussed in past years, past budget years, we've been coming out of a reactive mode, a survival mode from the previous decline in the economy. And what we have done is, with the uncertainties of the economy, uncertainties of the revenue stream that Matt alluded to earlier, some of these items they're multi-year, they're subsequent year, they're like a phase 1, phase 2. So what we've done is we postponed. As Matt said, we're not eliminating. If we were to eliminate them, it would probably take us back several years in the efforts that have been spent over the last year to get to where we are. But we're just postponing them to a time frame where we have a better understanding of what the economy is going to do or react to the COVID-19. Some of those items are rehab projects of our wells. We started the rehab project because we were, based on some past experiences, we are reactive to failures. The same thing goes with the booster rehab program, similar as the well program. Electrical panel rehab, there's some of our panels that need to go through and get rehabbed. Reservoir rehab, as you see, there's 3 reservoirs. We are postponing what would be the next series or phase 2 reservoirs to rehab, and the same thing goes with well 22 item road 78, which is also another well rehab. So well rehabs and a lot of our rehab projects being proactive have been postponed, or we hit the pause button is probably a better way to say it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. One question when you're done with the item there.
I'm good.
Are you done? Okay. Those backup generators, are those portable? Are they trailer mounts? So we can take place to place?
I'm sorry, I cut you off. Please finish your question.
No, that was it. Are they either trailer mounts or portable on skids or something so we can move them if necessary?
They're not trailer mounts, and they are a skid, so to speak, but they're going to be mounted as a permanent basis. So what I've brought to staff, well, what staff has brought to the board in previous board meetings were concerns that were highlighted during our emergency response plan update, more so highlighted during the PSPS, the presentation that was done by Edison, and being to respond to emergencies. So what staff did is looked at our system and looked at our pressure zones, ideally locating wells in areas, or I'm sorry, generators for wells that would allow us to have wells run to higher elevations, thus utilizing the minimal generators, portable generators that we have to move water around our system. So with those 3 backup generators, we should be able to move water throughout our entire system.
Okay, so they're strategically placed, in other words.
They are.
All right, perfect.
We were looking at portable. We thought that there was a savings in cost. We also thought that there was a savings in time or requirements through AQMD, but it's actually opposite of that. So what operations has done is brought in an expert, if you will, to evaluate this, and this effort's has started back in January of this year.
Okay, Randy, you done? I got a question when you're done.
Yep, I'm done.
Okay, the reserves that we call reserves, which Mission Springs Rural Water District doesn't really have reserves. We have more continuing appropriations. Can you kind of make a difference between reserves and do we have actually what's called reserves, or are they continuing appropriations for the most part?
Okay, sure. The reserves that are outlined in the monthly financial statements, we only have one major reserve, and that's what we refer to as our capital reserve. That was a minute motion passed by the board, I believe, in about 92, to set aside in that reserve 50% of the annual depreciation amount. That reserve is, if we would have funded the entire 50% for that entire 28 years, there is a figure on the monthly financials that says what that reserve would have been. We don't have that much money set aside. We're slightly shy of that amount. So that is our capital reserve. Currently, I believe it's in the neighborhood of 27 million. Off the top of my head, don't quote me on that. Continuing appropriations, on the other hand, is, and basically this list is our continuing appropriations. These are projects that have been approved by the board as part of the budget process in the past, and we put them on this list as we have in the projects that are highlighted in green. And the only way they come off this list is when the project gets completed. Then we take it off this list and put it into our fixed asset system, and it begins to depreciate those assets going forward. If a project is not completed, for instance, let me just scroll up to some older projects. And again, some of these might be completed. For instance, Desert Willow Waterline Replacement Program. This was put on the continuing appropriations list and approved by the board as a capital project about 2 or 3 years ago, estimated to be 1.2 million, but we've only spent $24,000 on that project. So until we either deem that project, incomplete or not going to be completed, or for some reason it needs to come off here other than being completed, we would take that off. For whatever reason, I don't know the details of this exact project, but it's obviously been on hold. And when that project is completed and we spend all $1.2 million to complete the project, it will come off this list and go down. It will be in this column in that year that it's completed. and then it will go into our fixed asset system and begin depreciation. So this is literally any project that has been approved by the board in the past that has not been complete. So it does go back a few years, but this is how we document what the board has approved, but not yet been completed as a project.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before I move on?
I have one question about the generators. When those are, how is that brought to the board in terms of how the generators will be placed on? Are they going to be inside of buildings and protected, or are they just going to be dropped on a concrete slab? What's the plan there? And is that something that the board has generally been involved with? My interest is that I've noticed that a lot of our well sites are not particularly designed in a way that proves that the district gives the attention necessary to what could be a beautiful asset as opposed to something that's just kind of stuck out in the desert.
Danny, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, for the most part, we've looked at a couple of different options, and the way that generators come today, they come in sound enclosures, all enclosed, so they're being designed to be on slab, not in a building. It's similar to what we're doing at the regional plant. So it's what we have currently at our lift station, but they're not being slated to be installed.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
And
All right.
if I may, to touch on the note that one of the things that we have been doing over the last 18 months as an operations review is exactly that, is looking at our facilities, our well sites, our reservoir sites. Part of those rehabs are also taking these facilities and putting them in bringing them back to a condition that they should be in. Again, we've been operating under a survival mode, so a lot of things, because of short staffing, has been put off, and that's been the efforts of the last 18 months, is to identify our maintenance programs, inadequacies, if you will. So I just wanted to shed some light on that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Dan, also I'd like to answer a little bit of that. Years ago, we thought, because our sites, they don't look very good, so we tried landscaping and making them look real pretty and everything. But what happened was, and the policeman also said that it gave cover to the kids that want to go in and party, or to the homeless, or to whatever, and it put our facilities, our wells, in danger. So we just had to take everything off so they could be open, so the cops could see in. That was what happened with that.
Okay, well, I see some districts have, brick buildings for their, that appear to be impenetrable, but I know that they're not. But we have some that are in what I would consider areas that they should be given a little more attention than the district's given them. I understand not putting shrubs around them, but I'm not sure all of them need to be just left. Just.
So that's a good point. Okay, thanks.
Some of them deserve a little more attention than they're getting. Let's put it that way.
And that's what we're analyzing. We are analyzing. We do have a well building standard. We do have a fence standard. And everything that's been new since well 37 has that applied. Well 34, well 37, well 42 is received bids, and we'll be working on that project. But the district, again, we could have easily had a $10 million capital budget taking and retrofitting a lot of our sites. So in light of what we're dealing with today, some of those items are going to be postponed, but we have staff looking at the need to upgrade fencing. Some of our sites already have that in current budget items that were up above the green. And that also shed some light to the camera system, trying to improve on our security for some of these areas that are remote.
Okay.
Excuse me, but I think I'd like to add a little bit more history to this, and that many of these facilities are long-term facilities, continuing appropriations. And, you know, many of these, and Director Grasho's right. I got here, I had the same observation, but they were put in sometimes 20, 30, 40 years ago. So, and recently we've been doing, I think, a pretty good job of making our new well sites very attractive. If you look at 37, we put a special building on it. It's not brick, but it is a metal building that looks very nice, and we have a nice looking fence around it. Danny can testify that I really insisted on having these facilities look more appropriate for something that we're using to supply a safe potable water supply to the people we serve. So your comments are correct, and we're trying to put those in place, but it's going to take some time to undo what's been done in the last 40 years. And so we're trying to do it within the budget, and I think we're getting there. That's all.
Okay, any other questions?
If I may add, earlier when Director Grasho asked about the generator, I forgot to bring something up. There's a generator that's listed on row 108, which is for well 2731. There's 2 wells on that site. It is about $111,000 higher than the other 2 items. And again, during this analysis, we determined that we have to maintain a generator for the larger well, which is 31, which requires a 600 kW. So that particular site has a larger generator set compared to the other 2 to accommodate both well 31 and 27 with an automatic transfer switch and a manual transfer switch. So we could, it was determined that 1 larger generator would maintain our needs at that site rather than 2.
Okay, thank you, Danny. All right, so that is the recap of the new proposed capital items. And as I went through earlier, these numbers down here, this 36 million that we hope to spend in the current year, we break it out by the 3 different funds, and then we break it out by grant and loan proceeds net of those. So that is a recap of our capital program. And basically that number ends up down here in this portion after we determine how much cash we're going to produce. That's the biggest portion of the use of those funds is towards those capital projects. So back up to where this cash comes from, in looking at our operating revenues and expenses, I've got a comparison to our fiscal 20 budget, and that's where we want to go next. So what this spreadsheet does is looks at the first 4 columns of the spreadsheet that we've looked at so far this morning. And so this is 2021 current year operating budget. This is the same numbers for prior year, 1920 budget, and this is the difference between the 2. Obviously, you see here that there aren't a lot of large differences between the 2. And this is the theory that I mentioned earlier, that if we had our choice, we would just pass a continuing resolution and continue operating under the old budget. And that's effectively what we're doing, is just forwarding last year's budget to this year. And we'll look at some variances here. There's obviously some variances, but I want you to see that most of these variances are very small when you consider we're talking about a $17 million operating budget, these are very small percentage variances from prior year. Any questions on that? Okay, so again, what I referred to earlier is this different format. This has always been provided in our annual audits as a supplementary information, but we wanted to include it this year for discussion purposes because I think it's a lot more meaningful. So basically, we're going to look at revenues and expenses just grouped in a different way that will probably be a lot more meaningful. So when we look at, this is our revenues and expenses by function and current year budget compared to prior year budget and the difference between the two. Our revenues on this format include all of the revenues, so it's operating and non-operating. And then expenses are the same. It is both operating and non-operating expenses. So we have just total revenue and total expenses. Okay, so again, looking through here, all of these variances down to here are very minuscule when you look at the dollar figures involved here. So we're effectively assuming we're not going to bring in any additional revenue, even though we had the effects of a rate increase go into effect January 1. Hopefully what our actual is tracks ahead of this, but for conservatism purposes, we're going to go with last year's budget and not assume any increase in revenue. The two biggest fluctuations here are investment income. Now, obviously that's a little surprising, but what we did was took last year's and reduced it by 20%. Whether or not that's a good number to reduce by, I guess, will be determined. Interest rates have definitely gone down, but we're still seeing positive returns in the CalTrust investments. And so we do still expect to make some off those investments during the year. Obviously, if we get into April, May, June, July, and things change, this is why staff's recommending we come back in 3 to 4 months and review this. That could go down. It could go up. We'll see. Grants is, as I alluded to earlier, a very much a guessing game. And so those are our best guesses as to what grants we'll get during the year. Again, this grant is, this number is almost 100% related to the amount of money we plan to spend on the regional plant that will hopefully be eligible for grant proceeds. Okay, so that's a recap of both our operating and non-operating revenues.
I have a question.
Sure.
On you're expecting to spend somewhere close to $9.5 million on the plant this year?
Yes.
What would that include? What part of is that planning and design or what?
Danny, do you want to answer that?
Sure. It would be the remainder of the plan and design, and with the current schedule that I've shared in the past, we're working through the SRF grant or special low interest loan process, but we're looking to break ground on that project based on an exercise that we asked AECOM, the designer, to prepare. Would be a burn rate, so to speak, specifically for what Matt and his accounting team does, is tries to anticipate what the cash flow for the year would be. So barring any other issues, we're expecting to move forward with construction, and that's the first year of construction costs.
Oh, so are you saying this includes some construction too, potentially?
Yes, sir.
All right. And would the recent assessment district that passed, is any of that involved in this at all, or is that completely separate because you're going ahead with the plant, regardless of what happens with grants, I guess, that are in an application type process right now for the assessment districts?
Yes, this does not include any assessment districts. Those would not be included until a grant was approved and the area was approved as a project. And that would most likely be brought to the board individually during the year as we find those grants and they're approved. We'll bring those individually by area as we intend to construct those collection systems.
That assessment district has a 10-year life, I guess.
Correct.
When do you think we'll know whether we're going to be able to bring that in as part of the system? Is that because I guess we can't do anything unless we get grant money for a portion of it. It slips my mind. I guess that's to actually pay for part of the infrastructure, not having to do with anybody's septic tanks. But we said something to the effect that we're not going to do anything unless we get a certain amount of money. If you could you remind us what that is? And
Sure. Basically, when the assessment district was voted into existence, it is treated as a cloud on the property title.
right.
In other words, the assessment amount is not yet levied on the property.
Right.
That does not happen until we go and find a grant and size a project that will fit the grant, get the grant, design the area, and build the project. And when the construction is complete, the assessment is then levied for the part of the assessment district that gets constructed and completed. And at that point, then it is the traditional assessment that shows up on property tax rolls. As far as when those grants come in, that is 100% crystal ball. We won't know. Last assessment district 12, we literally had areas and grants throughout the 10 years. And obviously we didn't get it all completed, and that's why we formed 8018, but there is literally no way to determine when those grants may come along.
Can you tell me, or can any of you tell me where we would need to be from where we are today? How far would we have to travel, and how fast to get to what they call a shovel-ready project on the assessment district construction? So in case grants come available through what I would anticipate to be when we built the overpasses along the freeways, that happened, and that money was turned on overnight. I'm expecting something similar to happen, but we had to have those overpasses designed and ready to build, and they happened to be so. So we were able to take advantage of that. I wonder how close we would be to be able to take advantage of the same situation with that assessment district.
I'll start out, and then Danny can fill in to answer that question. What we've what we've done is we get a variety of grants. Some of them, basically, they're in two categories. They're either in the planning or the construction. Much of what we started out doing was in the planning grant, was a part of it, was to put together the design, a lot of the SQL analysis. We're not quite there, but we do have grants in place to finish off a substantial amount of the design. And for the most part, we have much of the environmental analysis done. And Danny can get into the details. We have several items in place through the grant process to finish the design, on a major part of the project. And part of what's happened is we've designed these to a certain spec. Then we come along, for example, and the Corps of Engineers provides us with some funding. Well, they want to see the spec in a different format. So we've got to go back and redo that. It's really difficult just to quantify this in a nice, simple answer. We basically have been, in the last 15 years, probably brought in maybe 25 to 30 million in grants, million in matching funds. And we've always been able to do that because we are probably, of all of the applicants, the most shovel ready. We anticipate this. I remember 13 or 14 years ago when and I don't know if Nancy was with me or Randy, but we walked into the Corps of Engineers office, and the first thing they said was, well, tell me about your projects. We told them about the project, and they said, well, we really like this, but we can't give you any construction, but how much money would you need to start the design? And I think I basically had a good idea of what we needed and gave them that figure. And we, for 3 or 4 years after that, got a consistent funding just to put together the design on part of the project. So it's kind of a hit and miss. We need to keep going back to Washington, D.C. We need to look at what the federal funding is that's sort of channeled through the state. And then when we started out, they had basically what they call a year, whatever. What do they call it, Nancy? Earmarks. And now those went away. So then it was mainly through appropriations and through budgeting. We worked that route for a while. And now we think earmarks might come back. So we are just constantly out there farming these grants as much as we can. The competition is getting a little more stiff because of the IRWMP, and other agencies are starting to realize that there is funding out there. So that basically explains how the process works. And I don't know, Danny, do you want to give him some specifics on how far we are along on the design?
I got a question first, Arden. Some of the grants that we get, we cannot start construction until we actually have the money, and some of them we can get reimbursed. What are we talking about with these? There's no reimbursement. You know, sometimes you can't start the project without getting the grant money first. We've been through that. Was that federal money that we did that with years ago? Do you remember that?
Well, I'll let Danny, yes, and the construction of the plant is what we started to work on the grants for this project probably nearly a decade ago. And I remember Mike Thornton and I were the ones that put together with Fran Spivey Weber, and they liked the concept. And we went in under a program called Small Communities. But by doing that, we met all 3 categories. The problem is we were over the 20,000 limit, but we managed to convince the state that we would basically break out our system so that we would fall under that category, and got an agreement to do it. However, since that time, other things have happened, and we've worked with the state. If we do get that Small Communities grant, we could potentially see $8 million in grants towards our wastewater project. Now, the wastewater project is not just the building of the treatment system, but also the lines in the collection and interceptors to get it down to the plant, which I believe will run us at least several $million. Danny, you can tell me what the latest cost estimate is of that. So this entire project comes together with proposals that we put into the state. Now, Nancy, to answer your question, yes, we had to be careful that we had these things in place. But the other side, the flip side is we need to be so far along with these things before the state will consider will provide us grant money. Danny, do you have anything you wanted to add to that to further explain it?
Yeah, I can. The question on the table is there's a lot to unpack here, so let me do my best and help out what Arden added and answer Director Grosh's question. So we have 8 remaining sub areas. You've heard them referred to as A, D, 3, G in the past, alphabetical sub areas. Of those 8, 7 of them belong to AD 18, 18. Area M2 is on its own area, AD 15. Shovel ready. All of AD 15, which is M2, is designed and shovel ready. Of the 7 areas, AD 18, area A and G are currently in a design process with the Corps of Engineers via a grant. Areas H and I are also in a DACI, Disadvantaged Community Involvement Fund, through Prop 1, which are being designed. So that's 4 of the 7. The area K is designed, and as soon as funding becomes available, we'll put it forward for design. And then the remaining areas D and J2, or D3 and J2 are designed. So M2, D3, and J2 are designed, shovel ready, and ready to rock and roll. We have staff, including consultants, with their fingers on the pulse of what's coming down the pike as far as grant opportunities, whether it be Prop 1 or any other opportunity like the Corps of Engineers. So with A and G, H and I being designed, and once those are completed, those will also be added to our list of shovel ready. The way that staff has determined which areas get designed and become shovel ready are based off of a 10-point criteria that was analyzed during our 80-12 process. So that's how staff has moved forward specific areas for design, getting them shovel ready. And let's see here, there was a lot more. There may have been a couple more items that Arden hit on that I didn't add to, but if there's other questions based on what I just provided, please let me know.
Okay, thank you, Danny.
You're welcome.
So that gets us through our total revenues for fiscal 21. What we'll look at lastly is the operating expenses, obviously for fiscal 21. As we go through these, again, very, very small difference, a $500,000 reduction since prior year in total expenses, okay? And some of those major variances we'll look at here. These first 3 lines are, again, as I mentioned earlier, we are operating under the same classification plan as the fiscal 20 year. There has been no changes to the organizational chart or our classification plan. The only change to that from prior year, from fiscal 20 budget, was the change in the governmental affairs person. That position was changed to an assistant general manager position, and that is the majority of the effect of salaries, wages, and benefits. So salaries and benefits combined. Obviously, a large number here, a decrease in PERS expense, and what that boils down to is that side fund that we've talked about now for about 20 years is paid off, and that is no longer a factor in our PERS contributions on an annual basis, and that $300,000 represents that reduction related to that side fund. For board members that were not here or may not know what I'm referring to, when the district joined the CalPERS system. There was a decision made to, instead of current and going forward for employee benefits, the decision was made to make retirement benefits retroactive to the date of hire for everybody on staff at that time. And to do that, this side fund was created, and it was then paid off over the 20 years. And now we don't have to make that $300,000 per year payment for that fund. So that is fortunately history for the district. You see a sizable reduction in utilities. That is our conservative assumption of effect of the solar plant being online this year. Back when that project was being constructed and analyzed, we were closer to the $300,000 figure of estimated savings, and hopefully we still are. I'm not saying we aren't. I'm just saying for budget purposes and for conservatism, we're only going to take the effect of $200,000 of that in the expense reduction. Insurances, this looks scary. It's not as scary as it looks, and let me explain why. There was about a 5% increase in our liability insurance. We're used to seeing that. Basically, what this represents is if you remember in prior years, periodically we'll get one of those large Publishers Clearinghouse type checks from JPIA on the rate stabilization fund. We basically get refunds if there aren't a lot of claims by the participants during the year. And what this assumes is last year we did get a small check. That's why this number is only 120,000. This does not assume we're going to get a check, because there is no guarantee until we actually get that check that we're going to get it. So again, for conservatism purposes for the budget, it looks as though there's an increase, but it's only related to that possible refund going forward. Depreciation happened to go down from last year's budget to this year's budget. That's strictly a function of assets that were put in service at the beginning of their life have now reached their full useful life. And as that happens and we don't add as many new assets, depreciation will fall. So again, about a $500,000 reduction in total expenses from prior year budget. And that really completes the financial recap as we go through all of the numbers. I know that's a lot of information. I know it's even more of a challenge over the internet to go through these. I have all of this information available. I can email it to the board or whatever your wish is. Obviously, we have a few weeks before the June board meeting where additional review and discussion can happen. So if you would like, I can get all of this information to the board members after this meeting. And as always, and of course, contact me anytime with any question or further discussion that anybody would like to have.
So there was just on mine, I just got a pop down that said that Steve's, he's on mute and he can't get off or something. He's asking to get off mute.
Yeah, she got it.
Okay.
I had a question on the on the insurance check that you were talking about. That would have a lot to do with what other agencies as well, right? It's not just based on what we're able to do, but what other agencies as well? Is it?
That's correct. It's the experience of all of the participants in that liability pool at JPIA.
Okay. I thought that was the case. I just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
Sure.
Matt, I got a question on here. Somewhere when you were scrolling, I saw vehicle maintenance.
Vehicle maintenance?
Yeah, it was a $400,000 ticket. Wasn't on the expenses here. I saw it somewhere when you were scrolling around.
Possibly here.
Uh,
I'm not sure of a vehicle maintenance line item.
I think it was on the budget summary comparison.
Ah,
yeah, there we go, line 14.
okay.
What I was looking for was a comparison this year to next year, seeing how much it went down with our new rental trucks versus, owning our trucks outright.
Yeah, that number compared to prior year actually went up about 75,000. Now remember also that our rental program is not our entire fleet.
Right,
We
right.
do have, okay,
Big trucks, tractors, trailers. I understand that.
correct. Were also a couple of vehicles added, and I hesitate to go much further. I'll hand it off to Danny because he obviously knows the details of that program. But there were some changes to the original program. Danny, do you want to help me out there?
Yeah, I can, rather than, is Bassam online? Bassam, are you available or you muted?
I don't show him unless he's connected via phone.
Okay, he's muted. He's actually just texted me saying he's muted. I think he's the guest iPad, or he's the iPad user.
No, that's,
Does he have a camera?
Can you hear me?
no, I see his
I
name.
see him. He just doesn't have his camera.
Yeah, so
I'm here.
There he is.
that's a combination of leased vehicles, owned vehicles, maintenance costs, but I'll let Bassam just touch on why that part of that number went up, which is part of the 10-year plan of our fleet program.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
So this line item, I'm pretty sure includes the maintenance of our existing vehicles and equipment. So that includes all district-owned vehicles, backhoes, generators, our hydro excavators, and it includes the lease program itself, which this next round includes, I believe it was 5 new vehicles. I have to look back at the paperwork, but that is an all-encompassing line item, and that's why it went up $75,000 because of the additional vehicles that we're proposing to pick up this fiscal year.
Would those be new in addition to vehicles you already have, or replacements, or?
They will be replacements.
Oh, okay.
We're transitioning from district-owned vehicles to enterprise leased vehicles. So vehicles come in, vehicles go out.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Well, that completes my presentation if there's no further questions.
Nobody?
No.
Okay, thank you, Matt. That was very good. That was probably the best explanation I've heard in quite a few years. The format that you're using is really good. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
So no more questions, guys?
Should I assume that everybody wants these files, or nobody wants these files, or you will email me if you would like them, or how would we like to go forward with that?
Shouldn't they be uploaded to the Dropbox just because?
That's what I would suggest. Anything going to the board will need to be made available to the public as well. So just download them into the Dropbox, and then we can upload them to the website.
Perfect.
Done.
Okay, yeah, I would like them. That's good. Yes.
And that would be good for Director Martin to be able to look them over.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Sure. Okay, not a problem.
Okay, looks like I got some roof going on. Can you guys hear that pounding? My husband's up on the roof. I don't know what he's doing. Okay, so now I guess if we're done with item 4, I don't hear anything else. So we move on to general manager's comments. Go back to the other screen.
Okay, would you like me to begin?
Yeah, well, can we go back to the other screen? Do you want to take off the?
Oh, sorry.
Stop sharing. Thank
There
you.
we go. Thank you.
I really don't have anything to report other than we do plan to all be back in some form or another, still respecting social distancing by June 1st, which is next Monday. So that's also the beginning of the reentry. I visited yesterday in our general managers meeting with Jim and Mark, and they actually have started to move their field crews, and I think DWA and CVWD are back in today. And I think, Randy, you told me that they would be doing that.
Yes.
Some of their office staff is still working remotely, and but they do plan to do another phased reentry next week. So our reentry plans are pretty consistent with what others are doing. We do have some guidelines. Oriana's developing those, and Brian has been really helpful with this whole process. And we're working up, some things that we need to have in place. I know that there's probably going to be a requirement to have a plan I heard about yesterday. I'm not exactly sure where or when or who's going to do that. But we seem to be ahead of everybody on this. We will have certain guidelines that we want the staff to adhere to. Part of the problem for a short period of time only is that, our schedule to fix the roof and the bathrooms will basically overlap a bit with the reentry. In other words, we won't have the 2 bathrooms we are working on right now back in service for the first week, but we can work through that. We're going to split the staff up. We're going to put some of them in the annex building. So we should be in a different phase of this reentry by next week. We do not plan, and neither does CVWD or DWA plan to open up their administrative building to the public. So they will, and we are really having a pretty successful time with people paying online and working around that. I think everybody understands that these are just difficult times for all of us, and they know that we need to be very protective of our staff since they are a frontline group, and they are out there being sure that the water that they are drinking is safe. And I think the community appreciates that. And I think that's all. I can't think of anything else. Matt, Danny, Brian, do you have did I leave anything out that you can think of? With that? Okay.
Why would you bring back so many people with what are you down to 1 bathroom in that building right now?
No. We have 3 bathrooms. And then we also have the annex building, and part of the crew will be split into the annex, and we have 2 bathrooms there.
Okay.
So we're okay for that period of time.
Do you have
And
any
just-
thoughts on the next board meeting? It'll be this way or in-house. Do you have any thoughts on that, or have you considered that?
Have not really discussed that yet. I'll discuss it with you once I find out. Let me see how it works next week. Okay.
Yeah, no, I just was wondering. Keep that in mind.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, with that said, do I have any directors that would like to make a director's comment? I see Ivan and Randy. Ivan?
Sure. Just a big thank you to everyone that put together the budget. I appreciate the postponing some of those capital projects to give us a little more wiggle room. I did want to make note that Victoria's latest update, Desert Hot Springs more than doubled its reported cases over the weekend. Oh, Victoria's pointing.
Okay, thank you. Sorry that's glitching for whatever reason. Yes, so I just wanted to confirm, correct that because the map like glitched, and although I clicked on Desert Hot Springs, it gave me Cat City's numbers. So just to confirm, Desert Hot Spring is at 81 and 1 death, not 147, but it still has jumped and has seen 1 death where we hadn't had a death previously.
Okay. Well, that's better than the 147, but I just wanted to put out there with everyone coming back to the office, I hope you all continue to be safe, and thanks again for all the work that went into the budget.
Thank you.
Randy or Steve?
Just a quick update. I got a message from Russ. He's on his way home here in about an hour.
Oh, cool. Oh, good. Good. Okay, fine. Steve, do you have any final comments?
I don't. I'll wait and with anticipation to hear how you plan to keep the directors 6 feet apart in that room. But other than that, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have any except thank you, staff. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dory, for putting on this or being the host of this thing here. If there's no other comments, nobody else, I will, for some reason, I keep thinking I had to say something, but I don't remember what it is. So whatever. Okay, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.